One of the big misconceptions about the metaverse is that people think it's built on this crazy technology, but it's really just built on culture, not code.
Welcome to W3G, the official podcast for Myosin.xyz and your go-to hub to learn the latest developments in growth and marketing in the wild and wonderful world of Web3. I'm Julie Octaviano.
And I'm Blake Minaho Kim. Tune in each week as we talk to the best and brightest and keep uncovering insights so we can all grow together in the world of Web3.
Today we'll be speaking with Matt Bond Tangpoko. Matt is the founder of Banquet, a Metaverse studio and NFT consultancy, and Tangpoko is one of the very first virtual influencers and supermodels in Decentraland, and the founder of House of Tang Dollhouse.
You've probably heard a lot about the Metaverse in the past 2 years and have a lot of questions around how it all even works. In this episode, we dive deep into what attracted our guests, Matt and Tangpoko, to Decentraland, a breakdown of different metaverses, some awesome metaverse marketing case studies, and where we think this is all headed in the coming years.
Just a heads up, we unfortunately had some technical difficulties with Matt's microphone towards the end of our conversation, but please be sure to check out our show notes for any details you may have missed. So without further ado, let's get into it. Here's episode number 5 with Matt Bond and Tangpoko. So in preparing for this podcast episode, I was kind of, doing my due diligence and looking into said backgrounds, and I kind of saw an array of different experiences that you guys have had. So I saw some ranging from social media, underground music, consulting. So with that all being said, I would love to kind of get to know what led you both into Web3 and the metaverse at large. And I don't know Matt, if you want to kick it off, and then we'll go over to Tang.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having us, Julie. Really excited to chat about my favorite things as usual here. So my background is in marketing and technology. I ran a company prior to this called Treble, which was kind of like a LinkedIn for the music industry. We threw a lot of offline events where our community that met, our community of musicians and creators who met digitally could connect more meaningfully at these live social experiences. And when COVID happened, we started throwing digital experiences. We would throw virtual concerts a lot of times on Instagram, and they were just missing something. Like there was, when you go to a show in real life, when you go to these experiences, you part of the appeal, part of the excitement, part of the value of being at these live experiences is being in an amazing environment where you can connect with people organically and kind of make these spontaneous connections. And, these Instagram live shows we were throwing, which were very successful as far as numbers, just really weren't cutting it as far as just that organic magic. So I started looking into alternatives. This was early 2019. And through my hours and hours of research down the rabbit hole, came across Decentraland in the metaverse, and my brain exploded. It was the first time I had seen what I was trying to create through Treble, which was this digital experience that had the scale of a digital platform, but the intimacy of these offline experiences. And I felt that in Decentraland, the platform was really buggy. It was early stages, the graphics were kind of goofy, but there was just something about it, this community that felt so tight knit and this general sense of camaraderie at these experiences. And I just felt like this was the future. And everyone I knew thought I was crazy, but I was really, really determined and just, sold on this sort of new wave of social that this platform I felt was at the helm. So long story short, after jumping into the space and producing a couple campaigns and doing some drops, I connected with Tang because I decided kind of on the side, I'm a big sneakerhead, and I noticed there were no sneaker stores in the metaverse. There was a lot of fashion. Fashion was a huge part. Virtual fashion was a huge part of the metaverse. It's really the number one thing that you use, as an avatar. It's the number one thing that you use to kind of showcase your status and differentiate yourself and sort of build an identity. Sneakers were such a big part of that for me. In the real world, there was nothing like that digitally. So I wanted to create a sneaker store in the metaverse, and through, again, just the rabbit hole of Twitter, I came across this amazing digital architect named Tangpoko, who was making these builds that were just like really, they just had taste. That's the best way I can describe it. They just felt cool. And so I DM'd her and thanked the Lord. She responded and hired her to build this sneaker shop. And just through that process, we just connected, became really close friends, noticed we had a lot of the same sort of values and ethos and opinions on where the space was going, and started to work together on a couple projects here and there. And I realized how talented she was, even beyond the building side of things. And the rest is history.
And then is that when you guys decided to kind of come together and form Banquet, or how did that come about?
So Banquet was created prior to, it basically just me,
Uh-huh.
and Tang was working, and Tang can go into a little bit what she's been working on her end. But, once we collaborated on Absolute Land, which was probably our biggest project of last year.
Yeah,
Absolute Land, and, we'll talk a little bit more about it in a few,
for
but
sure.
Absolute Land was essentially Coachella's first Metaverse experience, and that was a pretty huge success. I would say probably to this day, our most successful project. And I think once that was in the rear view, and we had such a good time working on that together, and just so much chemistry, that we realized that it just made a lot of sense for us to continue working together, and took on a project with the female quotient, did a really cool project, where we basically brought Davos into Decentraland.
Mm.
It's called Davos Decentralized. Sort
Ooh.
of broke the walls down in Davos and streamed the programming that was happening in Davos into Decentraland each and every day, primarily on the female quotient's headquarters, which Tang built. So we kind of went directly from Absolute Land
Mhm.
into Davos Decentralized, and the space moved so quickly that the next thing you know, we were
Yeah.
just continuously collaborating on things and batting things back and forth together. And
Before we go too much deeper, I want to also make sure
yeah,
we get Tang's side. I want to hear a little bit
yes,
from you, Tang, in
absolutely,
terms of how you got into Web3, Metaverse, all this, because obviously you were doing some
yeah.
really cool stuff, and you and Matt found each other as kismet. But we want to hear your origin story a little bit too, and then we'll dive deeper into Banquet and all the cool stuff you guys are doing.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It all started way back in 2021. I had just heard about NFTs,
Hmm.
watching the news, living the Web 2 life. And I saw, I
Hmm.
think it was, yeah, and Cat, the little Pop Tart cat, and
Hmm.
then heard
Yeah.
about Beeple. And I was like, what is this all about? And then I discovered Krista Kim's Mars House. And I don't know if you
Okay.
remember that particular art piece, but she had made this 3D kind of LA style of the like mid-century modern, but futuristic. And it was just beautiful. And I had a 3D background already and a design background already, and was already working in the 3D field with the team in a much more boring area. And we were sort of looking for ways that we could have more fun. And I thought, wow, I really would like to make an NFT that is a 3D space,
Hmm.
an immersive environment where you could bring people inside. So I got that going. I got designs together. I started working with the team. We started building it. And I realized, well, where the hell does this thing live? Does it live on OpenSea? And then what is it? A picture that nobody can see? You can't go inside it. Like, where do I put this so that I can actually share this with people? And I began to look at virtual worlds and different metaverses. I looked
Hmm.
at Somnium Space. I looked at Crypto Voxels. At that time, I can't remember any of the other ones, but those were the ones that stood out to me. And then I found Decentraland on some Reddit subreddit. And, it was just like some guy
Yeah.
who was the first person he was friendly and warm and open. So I was like, hey, man, like, how do I get there? He's like, well, do you have a MetaMask wallet? I was like, no, what's a MetaMask wallet? I was
Mhm.
fresh.
Right.
So that's how I got in there, was really just the way Decentraland kind of like onboards and helps
Hmm.
out anybody who's interested. They kind of pull them in. So I got in, rented land immediately, and dropped my little space in there, turned it into an NFT, which was at that time was pretty cool to have an architectural NFT. There wasn't a lot of those around. So
Mm.
it sold immediately. And while I was in the space, started making a couple more. And then while I was in the space, I really realized that the same kind of realization that Matt had, that there was this really
Mhm.
thriving community. It was small, but super tight knit and very interested in creativity. They were building, they were constantly talking about building more. And that's what I really liked. Now, that said, as a female in the space, I
Mhm.
did feel kind of on my own a lot. I don't know if it's a female thing or just a bro thing, or
I think
I
that's
just,
Web3 and
an
tech in
OG
general.
thing.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I did find it like going to some of these events, I could see that people were vibing, but I just couldn't really find my own way to connect. So for the
Mhm.
first 6 or 7 months, I was kind of roaming around on my own a lot, just exploring, always interested in staying there. I never wanted to leave, but I
Mhm.
did feel like it was kind of a lonely experience. At a certain point, I decided to move from doing builds into wearables. And
Mm.
a big part of that was because I really didn't have any kind of super girly, fashiony stuff for me to wear. There was the
Yeah.
wearables market, but I wanted something that was like super, pretty.
Yeah.
So I made a couple of items, and then one of them last December was like this little pink dress with like slightly sexy, as sexy as Decentraland can get. It's a pretty PG little world, but it was a little more sexy than usual. And the place went wild for it. It got totally viral. And through that outfit, I started meeting other people. And we got together, we started talking more, we formed a group. It turned out we had these similar values, which is to kind of make people not feel like I had felt for that first 8 months, but to really onboard and welcome and bring people in and turn Decentraland into kind of like all these separate groups into one big group where we all belong. So that was kind of our mission moving forward. And to that, we thought we should support other creators, and we started going to a lot of different events around. And then we thought, well, we might as well build our own headquarters. And we built Dollhouse, which from the first night became the hottest venue in Decentraland. It has remained the hottest venue in Decentraland. It really is the heart of the metaverse where everybody goes to hang out, where newcomers are brought, pump out, at least 3 events a week, pop-ups. I mean, there's just always something happening there. This is where people go to just feel like, okay, what are we going to do? That's the meeting spot. And that's really what I wanted to be is the heart of the metaverse. Now, while all that was going on, I continued to do little builds, and I met Matt, which was amazing. And, you guys know Matt, or Blake, Matt. I mean, just talking to him fires me up with so much energy and so much ideas and fire. So from the very first time we met, I knew I wanted to work with him. As time went by, we had absolute, we just started vibing more and more. And now, I mean, there's not a project that I don't want to be with Matt on. I think we work super well together, and we have the same kind of short-term and long-term vision for what we'd like to see, what we would like to do, and what we'd like to see the metaverse become. And here we are now. I'm sorry, that was a lot, wasn't it?
No, that was incredible. I love how in depth. I feel like we had all these questions in our brain before recording, and you guys just went at it and answered 3 or 4 in the best way possible. So
thank you. We're done now.
We're done.
Fancy.
See you later. Thanks.
I do want to go back to the question of Banquet, but before I do that, something that Tang, I guess both Tang and Matt, you guys mentioned that I do want to dive a little deeper into is Decentraland. And Tang, you kind of mentioned, what some of the things that were attractive about Decentraland were. I think, the community, perhaps the user experience. But as I mentioned, I am a little bit of a metaverse newbie, so I would love to kind of hear your guys' thought process or decision-making process into why you did decide, or I guess specifically Tang, I don't know if this is more applicable to you, but why you did decide to go with Decentraland over some of the other competitors and stay there, right? Especially competitors like Sandbox who, I feel like those are the top 2. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
I mean, I think that when you first go into a place, you're welcomed by a certain community, and that's, you feel comfortable there. But after I was there for a while, and then you start to realize oh, what is decentralization? What does it mean to own your own land? What does it mean to participate in the DAO, to be a real citizen of a place? And that's something that I liked about Decentraland, is I didn't just feel like I was on a gaming platform or even on a social platform. I felt like I had a say in what was going on in Decentraland because it's decentralized, because owning your name, owning land gives you voting power. You have a certain level of control over the direction of what that platform is going to be like. And that draws other people with a similar mindset there. So you have a really strong and dedicated and thoughtful community of people who are not just there gaming or just showing off clothes, but really have an active interest in what's going on with the platform itself. So that was a huge reason why I think a lot of other people are in Decentraland. It's actually, the philosophy of it is important to us.
Totally. And then I was going to say also, I think from a marketing perspective, right? Coming back to the theme of this platform, of this sort of interview, I think a lot of what Tang is getting at is that, Sandbox has been fantastic at building partnerships. We're big proponents of any metaverse that's growing momentum. Tang just did an amazing collaboration with Mona, which I'm sure we'll get into in a bit. That just dropped yesterday. But the thing about Decentraland is, and just in general with our type of campaigns, is when we do work with brands and we're choosing a platform, we're always going for virality, and virality at the end of the day is a product of culture hacking, and you can't hack culture unless there's a culture on the platform, right? So what I'm getting at is Decentraland is really the most mature and the most evolved when it comes to actually building a culture and a community on the platform. So, like I said, the graphics may not be as great as Mono, or the partnerships may not be as robust as Sandbox. But if you dive, if you look, if you lift the hood up and you look into what's actually happening on the platform, there are established cliques and scenes and niches and and community leaders, and there's a culture and there's an ethos and there's a whole world that that you can tap into with these platforms. And for the most part, the metaverse campaigns that do well are the ones that are able to successfully collaborate with creators and kind of go to market with the with those sort of tastemakers and community leaders on your side of the table. And when you don't have an established network of
Yeah.
creators, and you don't have like a sort of jargon and then like inside jokes and and certain scenes and certain like certain like symbols, I guess, of showing that you're in the know. Like if those things don't exist, then you're really losing out on a big weapon, I think, as a marketer that you could use to supercharge a campaign and to ultimately like drive a lot of internal buzz from the community itself when those campaigns come out. Right. And that's been a big, big benefit that we've had with the campaigns that we've rolled out is each and every time we'll put in those little Easter eggs and we'll make sure to tap the people in the community that we know are going to be, be important. I hate to use buzzwords, but important evangelists, for the campaign, so that it's not just like a brand shouting into the ethos, like, look at this weird thing we created, with this crazy virtual world. But we make sure that it feels like this brand is participating and contributing to this culture that's already been bubbling up within this platform. And Decentraland is obviously the most applicable place to do that. Just
I, re-
because
I, I really love that quote that you had from earlier. I think we're gonna have to like pull that out later. But what was it like? It's all about culture hacking, and it needs to be a culture to hack. And I think it really gets to the theme of. I think we see this in Web3 as a whole, right? Is like people focus on NFTs and crypto and metaverse, but they're all just technologies, right? Like they're technologies to enable something. You can't just create an NFT and hope it sells. You have to actually connect with the people who are going to buy it, who want it, why they want it. It's the same thing with metaverse, right? Is if you can do it, like you just said, you have to connect with the people who are actually in it, who are living it, who are breathing it. So
right, exactly. There are. It's fascinating to me how many people there are that understand Web3 as well as we all do in this call, but then get lost when it comes to the metaverse. And the metaverse is really just Web3 culture contextualized in a spatial world, if that makes sense. But it's the same thing, it's built. We always say, Tang and I always say, one of the big misconceptions about the metaverse is that people think it's built on this crazy technology, but it's really just built on culture, not code, and that's like, that's really like a big area where people when they enter the space is they try to, they worry too much about the technology, whereas the actual technology and the builds themselves are secondary to entering, participating in the culture behind.
So with that in mind, I'd love to kind of dig and bring it back to Banquet, right? Which is, when we're talking about culture hacking and working with the metaverses, how do you guys describe when you talk to brands, what is Banquet? How do you guys approach things? And then how does someone, how does it work? I guess for, if you were talking to just a Web2 CMO, who's trying to understand, which a lot of them I'm sure are right now, what is this metaverse thing? How do we get into it? How do we use it? How do you guys think about it? How do you talk to non-Web3 natives about it all?
So I'll tee it off. And I'll let Tang jump in, but yeah, I think it's interesting. So initially, Banquet has I would say two divisions, right? One of them is the agency that we have, which works as a typical agency, right? We work with brands and help launch them into the metaverse and succeed in Web3, sort of build out their presence, and help them figure out how they can participate in this new virtual world. And then we also have a second division where we work with creators, and that's sort of more like a venture studio in a sense. We don't really take agency fees for that. We'll basically take percentages of projects. We'll help craft, whether it's a T drop or a project, launch it, and then help spin that project out, hire the right people who can help, who can take the project on for more on a day-to-day basis. And then those are kind of more swing for the fences. Those are kind of more areas where we can flex our like creative muscles and whatnot. On the agency side, what we realized pretty quickly was that before we could even get into, we had done a lot of really awesome work for some brands that were more forward thinking in the space. But a lot of brands who are trying to enter the space, they don't really even know, they'll come to us and say, all right, we're really excited to join Web3. We've decided to invest a ton of our resources into Web3. Our
Okay.
first question for you is, what is Web3? And that's when we realized that, we kind of needed to like onboard them into the space.
Yeah.
We needed sort of a consulting ramp where for the first, usually it'll be about 2 or 3 months or so, we'll recommend that they retain us on a consulting basis. And that's during that period, it'll be a lot of like back and forth, with their leadership team, learning about sort of the brand, the DNA of their brand, their business goals, like what KPIs should they even, should they be using to measure success? Should they be coming into the space looking at Web3 as a new revenue stream for them? Should they be coming in looking at it as a new marketing channel for them? That's like a lot of times brands, like I was saying, they're excited to jump in, but they're not really sure even kind of what they're doing to jump. So we'll kind of help them lay the groundwork and sort of conclude that consulting period with a proposal for a campaign so they can continue retaining us to launch them into the metaverse. So a lot of times we do that, which is essentially starting from 0 to 1. But when it comes to the campaigns that we do, one of the things that's kind of unique to our process is we always recommend bringing in, sort of as we were hinting at earlier, we always recommend bringing in native creators to the space, right? So we don't have a large team internally. We don't have a big staff, purposely so, because every campaign is different. Every project is different. And so based on whatever project we've sort of thoughtfully designed for the brand, we'll go out and then recruit who are the creators in the space that make the most sense to bring on board, both to give the brand a sense of legitimacy and like insider credibility within the Web3 scene, and also just who are the people that have the best and most appropriate skill sets to execute on the campaign. And that's something that we feel really passionate about in terms of our process, something that we definitely don't see being something that we would pull back on anytime soon, because it really creates a mutually beneficial relationship. The brand gets those benefits that we just mentioned, whereas on the creator side, working with those brands give them a revenue opportunity and then opportunity to kind of elevate their name within the Web2 space that they might not typically have. And so being that sort of, not just being the agency that launches these brands into the space, but then sort of by the end of the project, being the platform that offers these opportunities for exposure and
activations.
And for revenue on the creator side in Web3 is something that we're really passionate about, just as a way to provide service back.
That's awesome. I guess with that said, it perfectly tees up my next question is, I would love to know more about some of the most exciting collaborations. I know you mentioned vodka for Coachella. I saw a couple others online, just general Google search, but any cool collaborations, anything you're super excited about, anything that you found to be most successful, any learnings from some of the collaborations you've done recently?
I think that if you're going to talk to me, you have to talk about Absolute and Coachella, because not only was it a huge turning point for us, it was a huge turning point for all activations in the metaverse. I think it was a real benchmark of success for what an activation could be, and still stands the test of time as a lot of people's favorite activation of the year. So what was great about that was it was, I think, probably one of the first times, like Matt was touching on, where we really reached out to creators and influencers and sort of iconic characters in the scene and brought them on board for this activation, so that it did not feel like a brand was coming in and saying, look at me. It was like, here, this is something that we're all working on together. This is, a movement more than something that you were watching. It was something you were actively participating in. So other than that, they really had a fantastic way of intersecting art and technology and music. Which are all the kind of the hot spots of what we want to see in Decentraland. They did it all in one build using local creators that we all knew. So that was super impressive. It was 6 days long, which was also really nice. It wasn't, a 1 day long. It was a scheduled 6 days with all the influencers. Of course, we had the two-way stream with Coachella. So this was a really cool thing that hadn't been done before. We have streamed from the metaverse out, and we have streamed from real life in, but we had never done a two-way stream before. So it was to be able to actually speak while we were partying in the metaverse, and we were partying for hours. I mean, this was like a 12-hour party that just didn't end. We were delirious at the end of every day, much like the Coachella experience, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So they would come into the Absolute tent and they could actually talk and interact with us back and forth. They would comment on what we were wearing. I don't believe we were able to see them But we were, like people were like, "Oh, hey, cutie, what's your IG?" Like it was insane between the and so that level of interaction hadn't been seen before, and I think that was really groundbreaking. So that went on for 6 days. When it was time for this activation to end, people did not want it to be over, and it got very emotional, which was super surprising. But that was the connection that people had with it. They had a hashtag that was never refresh, because once the build was over and they removed the build, it would be gone. And the next time you refreshed into the game. So there was people like having a sit-in at the end of it going, we won't go, we won't leave, we'll never refresh our computers, just because they loved this activation so much. So many really important community members today came in around that time just because they had seen the flurry of what was going on social media. Another thing we did well was really have a huge social media push about this. Like the colors of Absolute are blue and yellow. I swear to God, Twitter was blue and yellow for all of that. I recently was in a panel with someone from Stoli, actually. And even they had commented like, yeah, we were watching that every day to see what was going on, which is awesome.
Yeah.
As a Stoli drinker myself, I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just kidding. Love Absolute.
You like both. Yeah.
I like both.
Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, that was my favorite. Matt, do you want to add to that?
I just want to brag for you a little bit because Tang led the influencer marketing initiatives during that activation. A big part of what we kind of adjusted initially, we had some kind of very like typical kind of tag or whatever when you're in the I forget what it was, but we switched it up so that Tang's group is called the Baby Dolls, and that's like her group of it's a collective of her and her best girlfriends that run around the metaverse and go to parties together and run the dollhouse, which she previously mentioned. And so basically changed the the sort of giveaway functionality to being the baby dolls were wearing all like Absolute outfits from head to toe and kind of like hiding and running around the activation and serving drinks. And if you could find the baby doll and take a picture and post it on Instagram or on Twitter with one of them, then you would be eligible for a giveaway. And that activation exploded. We typically like an influencer engagement rate on a branded project is somewhere, if you hit around 4%, that's like a pretty successful influencer engagement rate. And from this campaign, thanks to Tang work and activating the baby dolls, we hit around 9.8%, which is absurdly high. And that was just goes to show like kind of giving a nod to the community and tapping people and creators in the space that the culture is familiar with, like, the outcome that you could have. The second thing I wanted to just mention really quickly on that project, which thing I'm actually most proud of beyond the stats, which by the way, over 200,000 people attended that activation. But beyond the stats, the thing that I was most proud of was actually an error in the experience. So we had a feature at the very top of the build. There was a tree, like that was built. It was like right on the top. And what happened was when you got too close to the tree, it would suck you in, like your avatar, and you would get stuck. It was like it was
a bug.
It was like a glitch. And I remember before we started with Absolute, they asked us a number of times, like, what happens if the platform is buggy? And we were explaining to them, well, it built on public code. We can't really do much about it. We just kind of have to move past it. And, they were nervous because of the, recently, I'm sure you saw, I'm kind of going all over the place, but recently I'm sure you saw with like Wendy's and the Godzilla activation in Meta, like there are a lot of times where when you screw up, Twitter is not very kind to you, right? And so we had this tree that was literally sucking people in and they didn't have to re-exit the game. But because of the way that we laid out this whole activation and kind of, as I mentioned earlier, positioned it as almost something that the community was presenting itself, not like behind some brand or an agency. The tree became known as the people eating tree and became embraced by the community as like a part of the activation. There was like a hashtag, I'm sure you can look it up now, where like people would be like, I missed the people eating tree, or like, oh shit, I got really close to the people eating tree, but like didn't get like, it became like almost a piece
For sure.
the experience. And like, that was an enormous, for me, that was like the best facet, the most impactful thing that I took away from this was community building is not just great for increasing your KPIs and this and that. Like, it's an essential part of de-risking things like the technology, the like inevitable bugginess of technology, or like the volatility of crypto. Like if you're entering Web3, there are a lot of unpredictable factors. But when you nail community building, then it takes that same mob that's sniffing out and looking for blood, and it puts them on your side so that they want to win with you. So when the people eating, when you have a tree that's bugging out, like it becomes a people eating tree and not like an opportunity to like tee off on the brand necessarily. And that's something I've taken with me, I think, and we've taken with us as far as just the importance of building that communal foundation.
That makes so much sense. That's a really
Amazing.
interesting way of just thinking it through. Cause and that actually is it ties really well, I think, into kind of what I was about to ask next. Cause I mean, when we talk metaverse, right? And I'm sure you guys, have thought and you've talked to people about this I think there is a lot of kind of fear, uncertainty, doubt about the status of the metaverse. And, I think was it last month or recently, there were some numbers that came out that was trying to say that there are only 6 active users or something crazy on Decentraland every month, which I'm sure you guys can speak to, right? But I'd love to use this as an opportunity for you guys to speak to that, right? So in terms of metaverse adoption, in terms of the communities you guys are seeing within Decentraland, I guess it's an open-ended question, but it's really more, what's your take on the current status of metaverse adoption, the people who are within it, and how it's growing and what it will take to kind of be successful? And where do you think we're headed, I guess, particularly with your experience at Decentraland and activating for brands?
I mean, it's definitely quieter than it was a year ago, but the everybody is still very strong and very hopeful about
Mm.
about the metaverse. There's the community is full of creators and builders, which is super exciting. And the other thing is that there's so many different types of metaverses as
Yep.
well. So you're going to see people that are going into games like Roblox, which is still pretty
Yep.
robust, but it's very much, like a children's game still, in my opinion. You do see a lot of big brands going in there. And sometimes I wonder, what is it just because they're looking at numbers? Is that
Yeah.
it? Because really, like, I mean, 13-year-olds playing with
Brand alignment.
cubes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. Whereas I think that there's so many other metaverses where much more exciting and artistic and immersive and challenging things can happen. So I think looking at the metaverses in terms of a video game platform is something that happens a lot, and we
Mhm.
can't. I don't want people to think about it as kind of a shitty video game platform, but really more as like an awesome social platform.
Mhm.
Taking the evolution of social media and the evolution of socializing is the way I'd like people to think about it, as opposed to video gaming, which isn't to say that there's not a gamification aspect in everything that we do. That's
Mhm.
just, that's just who we are and how we've grown up. And it's what motivates everybody these days, right? Questing and
Yeah.
rewards and points and status. And so that's still part of it. But I mean, I just like people to realize that, socializing and hanging out with people and sharing immersive experiences, that's what resonates. And in culture building, like Matt was saying, really, that there's a whole culture there that we can access and grow and be a part of. It's still early and you can really go and make your mark there. Yeah. Matt?
Totally. No, I agree 100%. And I think this is a great question. And there's a lot to unpack here. Probably
There's a
when
lot.
I have time
Yeah.
to respond to it, but I'll try to hit some of the keynotes. So
Yeah.
number one, just to address the 6 users or whatever that thing was in
Yeah. Yeah.
Essential.
The fun that came out.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so that statistic, and there was a lot of controversy around this, that statistic was very misleading because what it was counting was the number of wallets that were activated on a daily basis, meaning the amount
Yeah.
of people that were making purchases within the
Yeah.
platforms.
And
Um,
and more than that too, just to jump in, more than that too, they were only counting ETH chain as well, whereas
Mhm.
the majority of our economy is on Poly.
Ah,
so
there you go.
now what that says to me when that was happening, and Tang and I spent a lot of time talking about this,
Yeah.
back and forth for this, is the real issue that brings up for me in this, as far as Decentraland, is when you are running a platform that's decentralized
Mhm.
in terms of governance and in terms of its, you don't have a CMO, you don't have a chief of communications, you don't have someone who's managing the narrative. And to me, what
Yeah.
that showed was a struggle to control the narrative when you're running a platform that's completely decentralized as far as its governance, right? Which is a natural, not a criticism on Decentraland, more so just a natural sort of growing pains of like a platform that
Yeah.
nobody's ever seen exist this way. What I think Decentraland would have done differently had they gone back in time is control the narrative, sort of been more clear as to what their KPI was. How are they defining what a daily active user is? And I think as we see more platforms like Decentraland bring up, these platforms that are, run by with these decentralized government and with these sort
Hmm.
of democratized sort of, community ownership, I think we're going to see people get better at this sort of controlling the narrative. There's no Jeff Bezos and there's no Mark
There's
Zuckerberg.
no Vitalik for Decentraland. Yeah.
Exactly. And we're seeing, like a lot of times we always say that there's a difference between decentralization and anarchy. And I
Yeah.
think that sometimes it's good to have at least a figurehead, or not necessarily in terms of control, but in terms of understanding, like who are the people that can be working on narrative building. Because a lot of times, like the
Hmm.
narrative is so important in the space, and having decentralized control and building a platform in a decentralized way is amazing. But when you don't have people who are defining what success is for a platform, then you leave yourself open and vulnerable to those types of conversations. Generally speaking, though, I think taking a step back with the metaverse, right?
Yeah.
We believe a couple of things, right? We believe that the metaverse is inevitable because, number one, if you look at this next generation, as Tang was alluding, Roblox,
Yeah.
Gen Z and the generation after, called Gen Alpha, they use gaming like we use social networking, right?
Yeah.
And that generation hasn't yet crossed over into the metaverse, right? They haven't sort of adopted Web3 yet for a number of reasons. Well, they're starting to, but for a number of reasons. But I think as that generation,
Well, there's an article that came out, I think like a year ago, which is like kids are doing their homework over Fortnite, so it's a very similar like Web 2 parallel to that.
100%. My brother, my little
Yeah.
brother, shout out Damien. He uses, like, he goes on to Fortnite. Like, I used to use video games. The video games I used to use were objective based, right? They'd be like,
Yeah.
hit your head on the mushroom and save the princess and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
beat my friend. Okay. Now it's like their generation uses video games like we are in the metaverse. They use them to live, right? To do
Yeah.
their homework, hang out on a Friday night. And that general trend isn't going away. It's only increasing, right? And I think
Yeah.
as people continuously start to as that trend combined with the trend of people getting used to owning their digital identity and their digital assets, right?
Yeah.
Like the overall macro trend towards the metaverse is inevitable. Innovation
Yeah.
always, as a society, we don't ever unlock a better and more effective technology and then reject it. We always embrace it
Yeah.
eventually. We're in the early stages where there's going to be growing pains. And frankly, there needs to be better designed experiences. We're starting to see better talent from the Web2 world. We're still awaiting Epic Games' entry into the space, which is going to be massive, I think, for the metaverse. And we're starting to see, the Bored Ape side, other side, their lead builder, I believe, was one of the people who worked on Fortnite Impossible
Mhm.
Ventures. I might maybe screwed it up, but we're starting to see better talent. And ultimately, just better experiences need to be built that are going to attract people to the space, not because they think they're going to get wealthy or because they think it's like a get rich quick scheme or sort of like other NFTs,
Yeah.
because people are more immersed in those games. I think those experiences are really what we need to unlock sort of the next wave for the metaverse. It's just better user experiences and better game development. But I think
Yeah.
we'll be fine. That may happen on Decentraland, it may happen on other platforms, but ultimately it's going to be the same community of users that are going to be jumping from Decentraland to Sandbox to whatever that next sort of platform is. And don't know if it's
And
going
you
to
guys will
happen.
be there. You'll be on top of it.
Going back to
Love that.
Matt, I think it was you who said that the consultancy portion of Banquet, right? And obviously, I know you guys, huge proponents of metaverse and, what it brings to the table in terms of community. And I would love to kind of hear more about the brands that you're working with. Like, how do those brands think about the metaverse versus Web3? Like, how do you see it fitting into their brand and marketing strategies? Obviously, it probably differs from brand to brand, but do you see any overarching trends of what their goals are when they're jumping into the space, specifically with metaverse?
No, I don't actually.
Okay.
There's yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think there's sort of
Yeah.
like we alluded to earlier, there's a lot of people entering the space and most of them don't quite know why they're entering it. And
Yep.
they just know that, they're probably brands that, a lot of people from these brands that have been around, from when the social media boom came, and they remember entering, creating a Twitter account because their agency told them to, and telling
Yep.
their agency, does anyone care if I ordered a pizza? and then seeing the sort of, the evolution of social and the companies that got there early and the benefits they had and the companies that got there late and the consequences of that. So I'd say it ranges. Some of them look at it as an extension of experiential. They'll look
Mhm.
at it and see that as a way to, we were also, Tang and I produced a lot of the first kind of digital twin virtual physical activation last year. And brands will look at it as a way to take their physical activations and then extend them into the virtual world. Some of them look at the metaverse as a way for research and development to test different products. Like for example,
Mhm.
if you're a car company, even to take concept cars and allow, to create a dealership for concept cars and allow
Sure.
your consumers to drive those concept cars around and sort of test demand for certain products or digital. Um, some of them look at it as community building, which is, I think, when it comes to NFT activations, as a way to capture their super fans and sort of give them a stake in the brand and in the success of a launch or a certain clothing line or whatnot. We're seeing that a lot with fashion. Adidas did a
Yep.
fantastic job of doing something like that. It really depends, and I think, like, for the most part, like, what we recommend is that it's the Web3 should be, once you should be an extension of whatever your initial business goals are. And
Yeah.
then based on what you as a company are looking to achieve, sort of plug in and see where Web3 can help amplify that, because it's sort of like the internet, like looking at how does the internet help you as a brand? Like, there are infinite ways and sort of places where you could insert internet now, as we all know, like into your
Yep.
business strategy. But it helps to sort of have a clear sense of what your business objectives are and your overall marketing strategy is in general, to then sort of plug it accordingly where it makes sense.
100%. 100%. That makes a lot of sense to me. Tang, do you have anything to add to that? Or otherwise, I just
How
want
can I add anything to that, Matt? That was perfect.
that was impeccable. Well played, man. Well, so then actually building on top of that, right? I'm just gonna like kind of bring it all home, right? So I think this has been really, in my view, really insightful just in terms of thinking through what is metaverse, how should brands think about it, always taking back to first principles of what are you actually trying to accomplish, and then how do you leverage and how do you execute appropriately. I think looking forward, right? I'd love to hear from you guys. Where do you think? I mean, I think we all agree, right? It's inevitable. There is this world, but I guess in the next 3 years, for example, right? Like we're in the middle of this bear market. There was a recession that's about to hit. It's an interesting thing too, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on like physical versus digital. Now there's a new term, phygital, which is kind of a joke. I kind of hate that term, but
Yeah, that's
yeah,
Tangpoko's favorite term, right?
That's so ugly. Such an ugly word.
it's so
It's
gross.
it's a tongue twister.
Ugh.
It's just dumb. People just smash up words. But we're in a time now where I think, IRL travel has exploded more than ever, right? So it's an interesting thing of what do you think is going to where do you think this all headed over the next couple of years, right? And just wild postulation in terms of what do you think it's going to be that really helps drive that mainstream adoption? Is it when Apple comes out with an AR headset? Do we think Meta's going to suddenly dominate? Do we think, I don't know, or it's a game, or Decentraland suddenly comes out with something incredible? We'll love to just kind of hear your wild theories over the next couple of years where this is headed.
I mean, I think there's so many things that we can look forward to, and I think
Yeah.
one of them is being able to have a digital identity that crosses over into different metaverses, and
Yeah.
looking at different metaverses not as separate things, but
Yeah.
as just separate countries in one world. Like just like
The
a real life
multiverse.
travel is explored.
Yeah.
The multiverse.
There we
Ding.
go. Multi-metaverse. Multiverse. Yeah.
So just like that. So, I mean, making sure that my Tangpoko avatar, for instance, is represented consistently. It doesn't have to be identically, but consistently across different metaverses. And one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, was that I dropped in baby doll avatars into Mona just yesterday, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the first baby steps of that. And once you can have that kind of consistent digital identity across metaverses, then you start being able to bring that community that we talked about tapping into in Decentraland into all sorts of other metaverses too. So the community itself becomes interoperable. And I
Yeah.
think that's really important. So you need to
Yes.
have that consistent level of, that's how you build trust. That's how you can continue to build relationships, both professionally and personally with people is having an identity that goes across different metaverses. So I'd like to see more of that. Yeah, sure. Our goggles would be great. That would be good too. Hybrid experiences being a part of every experience. You guys traveling to Portugal last month, and I can't go to Portugal with you guys. I mean, it should just be something that I should just be able to hop on and party with you guys, even virtually, while you guys are there. It should be a part of every experience. Matt? Matt, what are you doing?
I could keep literally talking to you guys for hours. This is so incredible. Each of you bring in so many insights that it's just blowing my mind. There's just so much to unpack here. But unfortunately, we don't have the next few hours. So I'm going to reel it back in and wrap it up. We have this thing called rapid fire questions, which, as the name indicates, we just fire off questions and you just first response that comes to mind, just shout it.
Okay.
All right. So, biggest professional learning from this year. Tang, let's start with you.
It's more important to be consistent than it is to be perfect.
Yep.
Amazing. Love that. If you had $1 million, US dollars, I guess we could say, what would you guys go build in Web3 today? Obviously separate from your current work at Banquet.
I don't know. I think I'd try and start like, oh my God, this is such a hard question. Maybe like, like reality shows, like competitive reality shows, like Project Runway, stuff like that. I'd like to see kind of like a Web3 version of that, where you can sort of stream creators creating things, but in a competitive way with like a panel of judges. I don't know. I'd watch. I'd tune in. I'd tune in.
Cool.
Oh
my God.
Here first.
Boom.
Let's
Yeah. Probably knock it up next week, actually.
And then the very last one, if you could activate a Web3 project for any mainstream Web2 brand in the metaverse, which one would it be? Why? And what would you do?
Oh,
This is your opportunity to pitch. Let's go.
I really like a fashion brand called Area. I don't know if they're doing anything digitally yet, but I drool all over my Instagram, and every single post is just like, oh, I really, really, really wish they would let me do something for them on the internet, in the metaverse. Also, Meow Wolf. I don't know if you know them. They're kind of like I would love to. I think they're just like metaverse in real life anyway.
Yeah.
So I would love to. I don't know if they're doing anything. I heard something that they're doing in some metaverse. But if I could bring them to Decentraland, I would love to just like twist people's minds and do some really psychedelic stuff with them.
That'd be freaking sick.
Yeah.
Well, listen, and once this is out, we can send this to them and we can just tell them, listen, this is what we're thinking about. Let's talk.
Exactly. That's brilliant.
We got it. Marketing hack right there. Well, listen, I think this has been really incredible. We love talking to you guys. Maybe we'll do a follow-up next year, check in on the status of things.
Good.
And yeah, this was really awesome. So thank you so much, guys. This was really great. Really excited to share this with the world and let people know what you guys are up to and what we're building. And yeah, gratitude as always. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thanks for having us, guys.
for coming on.
All right. And then the last thing is, I guess anyone wants to kind of find you guys or learn more about Banquet and Dollhouse and all that, how can people find you? Where should they look? Let us know. Or
I live on Twitter, so follow me at Tangpoko.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks
a
so
lot,
much, guys. Really
Have a
appreciate
good
it.
one.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Talk soon. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of W3G. If you'd like to learn more about Web3 marketing, please visit myosin.xyz to get started.
And of course, if you're a fan of the show, please be sure to show us your support by subscribing and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you're using to tune in.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.